So the topic today is how to support our brains in changing for the better. And I think one of the most hopeful findings to come out of neuroscience is that we have the power to change the structure and the function of our brain by how we pay attention, which is significant. And so to break down what that means a little bit is that within the brain, every time we have a thought or a feeling or a mental state, it's a temporary activation of a pattern of neural networks. And when we have the same kinds of thoughts and feelings and mental states repeatedly, those neurons start firing together, they start wiring together, which creates deep neural structure that becomes the habit of the mind. And so the really good news is that by seeking out, really intentionally seeking out what is good in our lives, and then absorbing it. So having a felt sense in the body, which I'm going to talk more about later on, we can direct, it's called self-directed positive neuroplasticity. We can direct really helpful structures of the brain to get stronger, which it's nice to feel good in time present, but it's really about an ability to respond with resilience in the future to life's difficulties. So the challenge is we come onto this planet with something called the negativity bias. So it's built into the fabric of the brain, and it evolved because the brain needed to be more hypersensitive to signs of threat or danger for survival. So that was really super helpful for our ancestors who were out in the wild surviving in really harsh conditions, where if there was the slightest rustling in a bush, there was an awareness of it and there was the expectation that is a predator who wants to get me, run. It's not helpful for our resilience or our well-being in modern life. So essentially, I like to think about it as the brain is essentially scanning the environment, going, what could be going wrong? What could be going wrong? What could be going wrong? Or what is going wrong? What is going wrong? What is going wrong? And once the brain recognizes any potential negative stimuli or has a negative emotional experience, that experience is actually registered more strongly in the brain and it's stored in a deeper memory system. So what that means is then our sense of being, sort of our homeostasis sense, if we check in, is sort of this edginess, not okayness, I need something, or I got to get away from something. And the real bummer about that is most of the time, there's a whole lot more going right in any situation than going wrong in any situation. There's actually way more that is going really well from moment to moment than is going wrong. And so this negativity bias, it's something we're all working with. And the question is, how do we work with this in a skillful way? And according to Rick Hanson, who is an amazing neuroscientist who makes all of this work really, really digestible, and I recommend all of his books. He has a wonderful website, rickhanson.net. What he recommends is if we can intentionally seek out and notice what is good in a moment with ourselves, with the people around us in the world, and then absorb it. And so the absorption part is where we get those neurons firing together, and so they'll wire together. And because the brain has this bias towards the negative, towards signs of threat, towards signs of not being included, towards signs of not being safe or not being loved, right? The brain is looking for those, and they're stored in a deeper memory system. There's a saying that the brain is like Teflon for positive emotional experiences. They just slide right off. Whereas the brain is like Velcro for negative emotional experiences. So most of the time, we're actually quite good at having positive experiences, right? Like I wake up, I take a hot shower, it's a positive experience. I have a cup of coffee, I open my fridge full of food. I've got plenty, right? But we're not good at recognizing that they're positive experiences. And then we're not good at absorbing it. And the absorption part is it takes about 10 to 20 seconds for neurons that are firing together to start wiring together, to move from short-term memory through these short-term memory buffers into long-term memory. So the brain needs to know, like, why is this important? Why should I keep this alive? Why should this become part of how I sense and feel in the world? And so that savoring, feeling it in the body, recognizing why it's important is a practice. It's part of meditation. So I think it's important to highlight the difference between positive thinking and what Rick Hanson describes as taking in the good. So positive thinking is perhaps repeating affirmations or, looking on the brighter side. And that can be helpful, but if we only are saying those thoughts and we're not sitting and absorbing and actually having a positive experience within the brain body, a sense of peace or contentment or satisfaction or connection in our own bodies, those thoughts are just sliding right off. We're not building that really helpful neural structure. So positive affirmations can be great if we sit with them and feel them and call to mind why they're important, and they become a part of our sense of self. So that said, we're going to dive into a practice developed by Rick Hanson. He calls it the HEAL practice, HEAL, which is an acronym. And I'll walk us through what it means. And then in a moment, I'll guide us in meditation around this acronym, which we're going to do in a formal way as a meditation. But I want to highlight that you can do it anytime you notice a positive fact or are having a positive experience in life. So in the flow of life is really when this practice is the most useful. And according to Rick Hanson, doing this practice about 6 times a day, so just pausing for 20 seconds, anytime you recognize a moment of gratitude or a moment of satisfaction or connection, or you even just think of a good fact, like, how cool that I have a yard, right? And you really let it sink into this sense of being. We can significantly change the way our brains are functioning and how we're experiencing the world over time. So it's a good little 20-second, 6 times a day practice. But we're going to walk through it in a bit more detail. So the first step, H, stands for have a positive experience. And we can have a positive experience just because it happens in the flow of life, or as we're going to do in a moment, by recollecting, by recalling. Either a moment of feeling connected, a moment of feeling safe, at ease, or a moment of feeling really contented. And then the E is where we enrich the experience, where we really stay with it and we try and get those neurons to really start firing together. And there's different techniques we'll use within the enrich stage that research shows is what helps move this content from short-term memory into long-term memory. And one is duration, so staying with it. The other is intensity. So really to call to mind the details and the sensations that were happening in the body or the smells. The next is to make it multimodality. So to really be in the body, to have a bodily experience, to even take the facial expression of peace or contentment or ease. Also, physical touch can be helpful. So placing the hands on the body or imagining you're reaching out to someone. And when I first started these practices, I was like, this feels a little bit awkward. This feels a little silly or contrived. Yet when I recognized what I'm trying to do is prime the memory systems of the brain to register this is important. This is an experience that matters. So one other thing we can do in the enrich stage is actually reflect on why it matters. Why does a sense of loving matter? What does that mean to me? So I'll offer different prompts through the practice in this enriched stage. And then the A stage is absorb, where we really give ourselves permission, where we intend and we sense that this experience is becoming a part of me. And an image I like is almost like warm sunlight bathing down onto a white t-shirt, that really warm feeling you get when sun is on you. For others, it might be like sand sifting down between stones, or golden honey sort of melting into you. And this stage, in many ways, takes a lot of courage to give ourselves over completely to a sense of loving, or to a sense of peace, or to a sense of contentment. So that's A for absorb. And the last stage, L for link, is optional. So when I bring us to that final stage, just know it's optional. And what it entails is when we're holding this positive experience in the foreground of awareness, and we've really generated a felt sense of belonging, or of loving, or of peace or satisfaction, then we invite into the sidelines an experience from the past, or an experience that's happening in the present that's challenging or difficult or painful. So it could be a moment where you felt excluded. It could be a time in life where you were experiencing a lot of fear. It could be a challenging aspect of a relationship that you're currently working with. And so we bring in this challenging, we might call it a negative emotional experience, but I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just challenging. And while we have the positive in the foreground, we invite this more challenging material to be here. And what happens when we're holding two experiences at the same time in awareness is they start to connect with each other. So if you think about why talking about something difficult to a good friend makes you feel better, is we've taken this really charged, difficult experience, and it's met with love, it's met with connection, it's met with support. And when it goes back down into long-term memory storage, it actually is tagged with love and support and connection. So it doesn't hold the same charge. So what we can do in this practice is actually start to bring up these parts of ourselves that are needing tending and hold them together. And in the practice, you'll kind of just sense that this positive sense of loving or peace is soothing this challenging aspect of feeling unseen, or feeling anxious or worried. And it's optional. So sometimes when I do this practice, I'm like, oh yeah, this is really happening. And sometimes the negative is just like, whoa, now I'm right in your face. And if that's what happens, then we just pause and we say, okay, not for today. And we stay with just the positive and really get that felt sense in the body, mind. So it's an optional fourth step that really, when it works out, it's great. And when it doesn't, that's fine too. So we can experiment with it a little bit. Yeah, that was a lot of words on my end. And the research around this, if you are interested, it's fascinating and it's so hopeful. So if you are interested in learning further about it, I recommend all of Rick Hanson's work. And that said, we are going to dive into our practice. So as always, let this be an opportunity to really be curious, an opportunity to bring kindness to whatever arises. And just like in any meditation, the mind is going to wander off to other things. And the invitation is simply to invite ourselves back without any judgment. And so beginning in the body, I invite you first just to notice that the body's breathing. No need to change the breath at all. Just noticing the felt sensations of an inhalation and the felt sensations of an exhalation. And if you'd like, inviting the belly to soften, the ribs to soften, whereby these next inhalations are met with a softening body. And when you notice the exhalation, just riding the exhalation all the way out. Softening to receive the inhalation. And then going on vacation as the body knows how to exhale, riding the exhale all the way out. And following just one more breath in this way. Bringing the attention now to the facial muscles and meeting the life of the face just as it is, just noticing what's there. Bringing a tender attention to these facial muscles. Noticing the hands, filling the hands with awareness from the inside out, sensing tingling, pulsation, vibration. And bringing the attention now to the belly area. And staying curious. What do you notice in the belly? Meeting these sensations with tenderness. Noticing now the crown of the head, so from the very top of the head, traveling the entire length of the body all the way to the tips of the toes. Sensing the body as a whole, field of energy, aliveness. And allowing the body to be just as it is right now, just like this. And perhaps sensing the whole body breathing. The whole body responding to the inhalation and to the exhalation. And as we move into this practice, doing so really knowing that we have our own best interest at heart. This body has been with us. This breath has been with us since our very first breath. Just the intention itself that brings us to practice is enough. And so I invite you to bring your awareness to the center of the chest, the heart area. And calling to mind a moment in your life where you felt loved, or cared for, or where you were feeling loving or caring towards another. Knowing there are no perfect relationships. Finding a moment where you really felt seen, accepted, appreciated, or where you were seeing someone else's goodness and appreciating and loving them. And so in this first step of heal is where we invite ourselves to have a positive experience. In this practice here, an experience of connection, of loving, of caring for, or being cared for. And in the second step, E, to enrich, I invite you to call to mind the details of this experience. And perhaps looking for aspects of the experience that perhaps you overlooked. Sounds or smells. What was it like in the body? Did you feel in the body this moment of loving? To allow it to increase in intensity. And perhaps reflecting on why it's important or what it matters, why it matters to love or to be loved. And in this third step, to absorb, really give ourselves permission to intend and sense that this experience is becoming a part of the fabric of our being, sifting into you. In a sense, surrendering to loving. You might imagine the way warm sunlight bathes down onto a white t-shirt. This sense of loving bathing down into you. Or you might imagine sand sifting down between stones. Or perhaps golden honey melting down. Really intending and sensing in the body, loving. And if you'd like, if it feels nice, taking the facial expression of connection or loving, perhaps just the image of a little half smile or a soft, relaxed face. You might also experiment with touch, perhaps taking one hand over the heart or holding on to an opposite arm, holding a hand. And then this fourth and optional step, holding this sense of loving, of caring, being cared for in the foreground of awareness, where it's very vibrant. If you'd like, inviting into the sidelines of awareness an experience that's difficult, perhaps from the past, of feeling excluded or unseen, or an experience that is worrisome. And so inviting this more difficult material into the sidelines. And if the difficult material starts to overwhelm the foreground sense of loving, you can just let it go and rest in the breath, sense of loving. And holding these two experiences in awareness at the same time, sensing how the sense of loving can soothe or touch this more difficult material. Almost, again, like warm sun, just gazing down, touching, holding. Infusing this painful memory or this painful experience with the comfort and safety and connection that's present now. Now, in these last moments here, letting go of whatever images are present, and bringing the attention back to the breath. Noticing felt sensation of an inhalation, felt sensation of an exhalation. And allowing this experience to be just as it is right now, just like this. Just like this.